Welcome to Yumi and All Things She. Our podcast is about all aspects of being a woman, from motherhood to careers, romantic relationships to family relationships and dynamics, and everything in between. It's a chance to learn, explore, and feel what's genuine and imagined as a woman in this world, along with multi-generational conversations that will stimulate your soul. So sit back, laugh, smile, and even cry a little along with us as we begin our journey together. Yumi and All Things She. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Deb here from Yumi and All Things She, and today we are going to talk about low self-esteem. But more important than that is how to overcome it and thrive. Well, if you've been with me a little bit, you know we've got to start with the definition. And what is technically self-esteem? Webster says that self-esteem is a confidence and satisfaction in oneself. And more important than that, it's self-respect. How hard is that sometimes to just kind of pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and truly have self-respect so that we are thriving in this thing called life? Well, what we're going to do on today's episode is we're going to talk about 5 different areas and ways in which we acquire that thing called low self-esteem, because I know if you're like me in any way, shape, or form, that we've all suffered from low self-esteem from time to time. But there are 1 or 2 different areas in our life occasionally that it might last a little bit longer. Maybe we are in a little bit of a funk because of certain things that are happening. Maybe we're in a transition of a job or relationships. And so sometimes that low self-esteem really can drag on for longer than we'd like. I'll share with you, obviously, a story that I experienced some low self-esteem, and it was exactly that. It was a time in life when things were in a transition phase. I didn't really know where we were heading, where things were going in certain regards, and so I just kind of fell into a funk, and that was a period of low self-esteem, quite honestly. So I'm going to talk about in this episode 5 top reasons why women in general can cause low self-esteem and us to fall into that funk, my non-technical terms. But are you ready? Because let's get going. Well, the first thing for us as women, and I know because I've been here and I'm kind of in one of those places right now, is the negative body image. You know, I grew up in a family that was hairdressers, and I have natural curly hair, which you've seen, and it's like for our body image, it's similar to the kind of the hair thing. We always want what we don't have, unfortunately. And so as my hair began to get more and more curly, I wanted it to be more and more straight. Well, growing up as a young girl, it was always super straight. So we always want what we don't have. And I think that even as we begin to mature and we figure out this body that God has built us with, you know, many times we're not quite as satisfied. Our hips are too big or too small. We're square shaped. We're not curvy, you know. And as I have started to go through this process of menopause, I've watched what I thought was kind of an okay in-shape type body, and it is totally transformed in the last 10 years. So, you know, I look at others, and oftentimes I'm not looking at other women to determine whether or not I like their body shape or style, or even if I want to convert my body into that. What I'm trying to many times observe is, what do I look like to others? Because I know what I look like to myself in the mirror, and I don't know what that image is portrayed on the outside. So, you know, when we're out and about from time to time, I'll say, hey, is that kind of what my body style looks like? I'll ask my husband, you know, and again, he's really honest, which I love. And for me, it's not so much that I'm comparing myself to them, but I have enough of a self-image about myself physically that I'm looking to find out what I look like so that I can determine what I want that look to be for me in the future. And that's just one thing for us as women. You know, look at the media. I know when I was growing up, women that smoked were sexy. The women that were nice then, like Barbie, the new movie that just came out, guess what? That was what we all had to match ourselves up to, being this wonderful woman. They're advertising women that are sexy. You know, they're always the ones that are classy or wearing all this. And social media today, quite honestly, has, you know, everyone is putting their best face forward. And I struggle with that because I just want to be me, and I want others to love and accept me for being me. And I just want to be real with you, all of you, because I have come to find out over the years is that, I am worthy. I am good enough. And even though I don't look the way I want to look right now at this moment in time, doesn't mean I won't be willing to put the hard work in to get my body back to where it is. But I think it's very different today than it was a lot when I was growing up, because we had all of those famous movie stars that were these, curvy women that just looked so sexy and sleek, and they got every man's attention. And, who in the world wouldn't want to look like that? Well, the reality is I was a stick straight girl for a really long time in my life, and I didn't have any shape. And then, of course, as I get a little bit older in life, my shape changes significantly, and now I become a very shapely woman in all the wrong ways. But that is one thing that if we're always comparing ourselves to these perfectly healthy, these perfectly shapely women that seem to have it all going on, we then begin to look at ourselves in less than a positive way, which, if we're not careful, can truly lead to low self-esteem. Along with that is that comparison of others. And I'm just, one of the reasons why I don't do a ton on social media, I do what I have to. I check and follow, friends and things that are happening outside of myself, just to kind of keep a pulse on life. But I'm not really a huge poster, that sounds great, but I'm not a huge person that does a lot of posting on social media, because I don't really believe that I need to paint that picture of perfection that's happening in my life. And the sad truth is that so many that put those images out there, and then, a week later you find out that the couple's divorcing, and they were just over the moon and stars celebrating their anniversary 2 weeks ago, and now this is happening. So I think that social media really lends itself to, compare ourselves to each other. We see our friends doing this, or we see them getting a new car. And yes, I am super excited for them that they have those wonderful things in life. But I think our human nature tendencies try to get in the middle of that. And then ultimately, when we don't add up to what we believe we should be doing, is that then we feel less than adequate or inadequate, which then lends itself to low self-esteem. The idea, I know it was interesting to think about, is that so many young adults, and I didn't feel that I was there when I was, in those young early 20s, is that, we're raised by a family and by people most oftentimes that have already been through all the rough times in life. And by the time we're graduating and moving out of the house, they're in a different place. Their home is probably a little bit of an upgraded home from what you started out with as a young child. They're now driving better cars because their careers have progressed. And then we, as young adults, move out on our own or finish college, go our own separate ways and form our own paths. And we instantly think that we need to be at that age where our parents were 20, 30 years ahead of us. And so that's that whole concept of social media and everybody else that when we compare ourselves to others, we then just don't live up. And that's one of the things that I think I absolutely despise about the concepts of social media, is because it just people paint a picture. I won't say that the social media does, but what started off as MySpace connecting people together, and just imagine, look what it's grown to. So it's all about, let me put my beautiful flowers on there, and let me talk about all the meals I'm having and my drinks, and give this picture that may not necessarily be a true reality of someone's life. But we're constantly bombarded with those images. If you jump on for Facebook even 2 or 3 times a day for just a couple of minutes, you could scroll through pages and pages of this is what's happening, and this is what's happening with that person, and oh my gosh, they've got this great thing happening, and all of a sudden we go, well, what have I got happening? And if I'm not posting, so there is, when I first got off of it, I started to really go, well, what would people think about me? And I had to get real serious with myself and go, okay, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what images they thought were going on in my life. What's happening for me and what's real for me is what's really happening. So I had to kind of abandon any connection to feelings, thoughts, ideas about perceptions of others when it came to social media. And then also, what maybe perceptions of me were out there, because I just kind of withdrew, and I've been withdrawn for quite a couple of years. Another, just kind of transitioning from that, because I think we've talked enough about that, is that trauma and abuse are also areas and aspects in our real adult life as women that can really, really battle. It can cause us to battle that low self-esteem. And if you haven't been in an abusive situation, relationship, and I'm not talking just physical, but I'm also talking emotional abuse, is that if you've had people talk down to you, whether it's from a parent standpoint or a friend standpoint or a relationship, an important relationship in your life, those things oftentimes hang on for a really, really long time. It's not something that you just kind of springboard back from, oh, that was a bad relationship I was in for the last 3.5 years of my life, and now I'm just going to jump back and become this jovial, happy person. There might be some trauma that we need to work beyond, and depending upon how abusive that relationship was, we may have to really fight and climb our way back up to just some sort of a normal. So experiencing some of that trauma. And the one thing I try and remember as I'm meeting people or engaging others in this thing called life is that we don't necessarily know what each other has had going on. And just this podcast alone has brought several people back into my life, and they go, oh, I never knew that about you, and I'm so glad I listened to the podcast. I'm dealing with that myself. And I would have never known that either, because it's just not what we talk about. But when you're in that abusive situation or relationships, sometimes it can take a lifetime to come out of it. And even when you don't think that you are in some sort of an abusive relationship, what I'm starting to really dig into deeply on a personal level is some of those things that I have had to deal with from my childhood. And again, it was one of those things on the surface. Everybody around me and my family thought we were just absolutely perfect. We painted that picture for everyone in our community that we were just this little perfect family. Well, once we start to dig into the roots of why we feel the way we do, how the dynamic happens, it's really maybe not so perfect any longer. And so those are some of the things that I'm just really starting to connect to. I did some deep work today just on my financial beliefs, my money beliefs, and digging into, some of those childhood situations. But, all of those little things can cause low self-esteem for us, that feeling of not being worthy, and kind of connecting it back to, if we're not worthy of others' esteem, how in the world can we love ourselves? But the key to that is we've got to love ourselves first before we can love anyone else. And so we've got to do the hard work to pull ourselves out of those abusive situations in order to heal that unworthiness. And it may take a lifetime of that. I can tell you there was situation after situation in my life where I didn't feel worthy. And so I still, even to this day, am working on that. And the affirmations help, which we'll talk about. Obviously we got to always end with tips to make us a new, better us. That never ends, is what I'm finding. It's just part of the journey. And it's part of the joy of the journey, is just really not only using those affirmations to change my mind about things in my life, but what it's doing is, if the affirmations are designed the right way, they will actually recreate new neural pathways to not just mildly change me. It actually changes me on a much different and deeper level, cellularly. And that's what I'm ultimately going to. I don't want to just put a Band-Aid over a situation and feel a little bit better for a period of time and then get right back into that low self-esteem situation. I want to climb out and be done with it and create the pathways to make life a much better place. What also comes, especially if you've been in that abusive situation or some sort of an abusive relationship in some way, is the negative self-talk. So what the party was saying to us, we then buy into it, we co-sign that BS, and then we begin to have those same conversations with ourselves. I'm not worthy. How could I do that? I can't do that right. There was a situation that came up today, and I immediately caught myself going down the pathway that what did I do wrong that caused that to happen? And then so I start digging, and I resolve the situation, but my negative self-talk says that if that changed from this to that, what did I do wrong? And I had to really look at that and go, okay, I didn't do anything wrong. Maybe the facts I was dealing with were a little bit different, and maybe I need to readdress those facts. So having enough self-esteem to feel confident enough to go, no, I did the right thing at that time. Maybe I just need to look at it again and see if there's maybe a different or better way. And I did. And it actually ended up turning out very positive, but it wasn't without persistence. It wasn't without some self-reflection. And it wasn't without me kind of going, okay, so what was my part in this, positively or negatively? And then what can I do to move beyond that? So we may tell ourselves, though, that we're not good enough and that you're never going to succeed. Maybe it's financially, maybe it's career, maybe it's relationships. If you've had several failed relationships, I know the self-talk, the story we tell ourselves is maybe that, I'm not lovable. I'm too difficult. I'm too needy. I cannot be loved the way I need to be loved. And I don't believe that those stories are true. We've got to change the story within ourselves. We've got to love ourselves enough, because when we say those things over and over and over again, guess what we create? We create that within our own world. It's kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'm ready to change the prophecy and make it a positive, upbeat, fulfilling, enjoyable, lovely, wonderful life. It's going to have its obstacles, of course, because that's just what life is. But I'm ready to take the challenge, and I'm ready to make a difference. And the fifth attribute of creating low self-esteem for us as women would be that we have low expectations. We don't believe enough in ourselves because of that negative self-talk, or maybe it's the comparing to people. But we ultimately don't set high enough standards for ourselves or believe enough in our abilities to really achieve the goals that our life can achieve, that you can achieve. So we just going to take baby steps forward, and guess what we get? Little baby steps of progress. So we got to dig a little deeper. We've got to get a little bolder. We've got to be willing to thrive and do whatever it takes to get there. So those are the 5 attributes that really contribute most oftentimes to women with low self-esteem. And maybe one of those resonate with you, maybe not. But we also sometimes will set very unrealistic goals for ourselves. And then I call that the self-sabotage process, because one of my mentors talks about big, hairy, audacious goals, and we need to do these big goals. But what I am learning about myself when it comes to goals is that I always viewed a goal as a destination. I'd get there and I'd go, yay! What I've learned about what works for me is that it's just part of my journey. And so getting to that goal means that I kind of get to a place where things are better, where things are different. And then I go to the next level, and then I go to the next place. So I just continue that journey. That's what my goals are all about today, is just continuing that journey. But what sometimes will happen is we'll set such unrealistic, unachievable goals. Like if I were to tell you today that I'm going to go run a marathon next week, that would be such an unattainable goal for me that I would end up disappointing myself. And now it's going to create more low self-esteem. So it creates this vicious cycle. And I can see the hamster on the wheel going, I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to run a marathon. And then you know what? Next week comes and I'm going, I cannot run a marathon. There's no way in the world at this point. So I haven't done the training. I don't have the physical conditioning. I don't have any of those things ready to rock and roll. So it would be unrealistic. But most of the time then we do, so now I go back to that self-talk. What have I done? What am I not able to do? Why did I set such a high goal, which I didn't know was achievable? And we go down that rabbit hole that just seems to never pull ourselves up. So I'll tell you about a time in my life when I was at that, I call it the bottom of a low self-esteem. We were in that transition place of careers, not knowing what to do. Really, things were starting to get very bleak. And so I went to work for someone. I saw an ad in the newspaper at that time, I believe. We weren't doing any kind of the online advertising stuff, but I saw this ad for someone that was looking for a house cleaner and a nanny. They had, I think, 5 or 6 children at the time. Maybe 5 and 6 was on the way. And at the same time, I worked at Albertsons in the deli department. So get this. I'm a licensed real estate person. I have an insurance license. I have worked in a professional work environment, corporate America. I'm a professional training and development person. I've got all of these things that I could really pick myself up by the bootstraps and do, but yet I'm out there applying for a job to clean someone's house and be a nanny for her children part-time because she needed someone to fill in the gaps and help as that family was growing. And then I worked in the deli very early mornings because that worked for me in order to and dice deli meat, made salads. Again, wasn't really the most desirable work, and I'm not talking negatively about those jobs, but that's where I was at the time. I didn't have enough self-esteem to really go out there and make anything happen for myself, to represent myself as quality to anyone other than those jobs. Well, what I learned through that process, because that is part of my journey, is that I met an amazing woman that has an amazing family. They're now up to, I think, 13 children. So 6 was just the midpoint. But they are absolutely a wonderful, wonderful family that I still stay in touch with. I get Christmas cards of the whole kit and caboodle of kids and families. So that's wonderful. And I learned that I can choose and I can do whatever I set my mind to. That was a real pivotal point in my life. And, I can pick myself up. I can go do real estate. I can do the things that I know I am trained to do and that I have the ability to do. I just had to work through that extremely low self-esteem. And there might even have been a little bit of depression in the mix to get myself out. I just had to reconnect with people. And I had to decide for myself that I was going to change my reality and choose the next step in my journey, which I did. I worked with her for, 6 months or so. I knew it was a transition phase, and she did too, and we just built a great friendship, and I helped where I could. And like I said, there was so much more to learning in that process about me and who I was. And at that time, the relationships that I was developing were more important than the work I was doing. But it was a stepping stone along my path. I needed to be there in order to pick myself up and go to the next point in my life. So, but we're going to talk about these 5 tips that you can do to improve your self-esteem. And actually, I think I've only got 3 tips, but we're going to get through them together, whether it's 3 or 5, I don't recall. But the first thing is we've got to change those negative thoughts. So when we have that negative thought about ourselves, it may be worth journaling. This is kind of an extra bonus because I didn't plan on this, but maybe if we spent the time journaling all of those negative thoughts as they come up, or we write them down, then what we can do is, think of the converse. Well, I'm not a failure. As I did today, I didn't mess that up. Let me just go reevaluate it and see if there's something that I can do a little bit differently to have a different outcome. And I was able to do that, and I did have a different outcome, which was huge, significant difference. So rather than self-sabotaging, beating ourselves up for something that we perceive as something that's incorrect or bad about us, then what we're doing is we're actually telling ourselves the truth. Or being real with ourselves. Well, being kind and gentle with ourselves, because I know most of us would be that way with our friends, but yet how we treat ourselves, oh my gosh, we're our own worst critic. We're the hardest person on ourselves. So give yourself a break. Sometimes I'll say things like, gosh, if I could just lose some weight, or I feel so fat, or, those are not good things. We wouldn't say that to a friend of ours. So why do we say that to ourselves? So I go, nope, I'm just got a little bit more weight in certain areas than I want. And if I want to make the change and do something different, then guess what? I'm going to have to take and make the effort to do something different. Be gentle. Love yourself. Change that negative self-talk into inspiring thoughts, inspiring talk. Also, for the next one, number 2 is to focus on our strengths. You have, I know, significant abilities, whether it's you have a way of connecting with someone else, you have a way of talking to them, you're a great listener, and maybe you're wonderful with children. Focus on your strengths. And oftentimes what we do is we try and strengthen our weaknesses. So what we focus on is the areas that we're not so good in, and we're trying to make that a little bit better rather than going, you know what? I am just really, really good at this, and I'm going to go spend time doing that, because what that will do is that'll improve our self-esteem, and we'll feel good about it because there's a place where we can have success. We can feel confident. And it's more important for us to focus on those strengths than it is our weaknesses, because that's how we can celebrate our accomplishments. We can also make a list of those strengths and read it over and over again. I heard someone else today talking about when they need that simple reminder for themselves, they will write it on their mirror in the bathroom. They'll write it on Post-it notes or sticky notes and put it on the refrigerator and put it on their cabinets in the kitchen. They'll put it on their office, everywhere they can, to remind themselves of those good things about them. And you can do that same thing with all of your strengths. I am a very generous, giving person. I love other people. Whatever those places of strength are for you, connect with them, celebrate them, and share them with the world. I know we sometimes focus on that weakness aspect, but let that go. You don't have to be great and strong at everything, so focus on what's weak. One area that I've recently really, really started to dig into was spending some time with myself in meditation. I have heard of meditation. I have heard people talk about meditation. I have seen meditation for years and years and years and years and years, but I just have never decided to jump in and give it a try. What I have found is that it can be a way to connect with our inner self, our inner soul, a place to learn, a place to envision and focus those positive thoughts. What that does is it then begins to build that strength around us when we put those happy thoughts in place, when we give ourselves time to heal through a meditation. What starts out a little bumpy, I hear that all the time. I can't really connect. I can't really envision. I personally know for me, if it was just quiet silence, I probably couldn't meditate too well. But if I have a guided meditation, that's what works for me. Sometimes some music. I love music. I connect with music. Earlier today, we were listening to the Chicago Symphony. Love it. They were playing Beethoven. My husband mentioned it to me. I said, let's listen. I want to hear those instruments. And oh my gosh, it was phenomenal. So find something that connects your soul. And I would challenge you to give meditation a try. Don't give it just one try. You got to give it a couple of different times. And maybe if there's someone that you admire, there's lots of meditations out there on YouTube or podcast meditations that you can listen to as well. But I have found recently that meditation really helps me slow myself down, stop that thinking, but even more than that, it's changing my subconscious thinking and allowing me to reconnect and choose how I want things in my life to be, rather than just letting them kind of unfold in their own natural way. Is that I'm back to making those decisions myself and creating that destiny and painting the picture and vision the way I want that to be. So no longer am I at the mercy of just life doing what it does. Guess what? I've got the ability to envision the future, where I go, what I do, where am I going to travel to, what are the things I'm going to accomplish in life. I still have a lot of life left. And guess what? I'm not going anywhere anytime soon, as far as I know. So if you are thinking, rather than thinking such negative thoughts, just simply embrace the change and the challenges that you face. Rather than resisting, give in to the love. It's absolutely amazing. And love yourself through that meditation and through your daily life. What I found is that situations come and go. The way we're feeling, if we're in a place of low self-esteem, it'll come and go. And that's okay. Feel the feelings and dig deep to get into your soul. Find out what's really causing that, because ultimately what we think might be causing that low self-esteem, once we dig a little bit deeper and get a little bit closer to our heart and figure out what's really happening inside of us, which might be coming from a root from childhood or somewhere else, then we can actually pull the root up, expose it for what it is, and then create new roots as an adult to go where we want to go in life. We're not at the mercy and destiny. So the other thing is to be sure and surround yourself with positive people. I know I've talked about that. Sometimes we feel like we're bound to relationships because of ties or coworkers. I've got to go to work. I work next to them. Doesn't mean you have to be best buddies. There is an easy way to just be coworkers and not necessarily have any kind of close-knit relationship. Pick those, be around those that you feel safe with, that honor you for being you, and that you can be yourself. You don't have to be this made-up, phony person in order for the relationship to exist. But we can also try spending time with people that are negative and critical, and put your shield of armor up. That's one way to deal with that, is that, you just also have to make sure that we're not self-sabotaging, especially in those relationships. Sometimes we feel like we're obligated because they're family. We're obligated because they're a parent or a brother or sister. But sometimes what that does is that draws us right back into that old pattern, that old addictive nature of going through this cycle. And I've seen it too many times with so many friends and family that, they just walk back into because of an expectation of being family or an obligation. And then they come out and it takes them, 2-3 weeks to kind of get themselves back on track. So recognize those for you if that's the case. There's lots of people in the world, and there's lots of people that'll love you, which is why we're coming here together. And of course, not last but not least, so I guess I did have 5 tips in this one. If you need additional help, you can seek professional help. You can seek group therapy if there's an option for that. You can reach out to a meetup group, a support network. You would be amazed at how many people out there are really wanting to connect with others that might be struggling with what they're struggling with. And because of that, I have actually thought about one thing that I want to offer all of you as my listeners, is that I have opened up my coaching practice to take 10 new clients, and I'm hoping that that will be you if you're looking for someone to reach out to. I specialize in life coaching, and it goes everywhere from navigating life's transitions to building relationships, but ultimately it's about helping each other as women to get to the next place in life. If you find that you are in that place, I have down in the description of the podcast and in the show notes is a link in order to schedule a meet and greet with me. So if you think it might be something for you and there's some place that you're struggling with, by all means, reach out to me. Let me know. I would love to be able to help you in some way. But here's the news for next week. So those are our 5 tips. Be sure that you are hanging around good people that give you good vibrations, that you're really being kind and gentle with yourself, and that you're taking care of yourself. So there are lots of ways that we can help each other really get to the next level in self-esteem. But here's some really cool news. Next episode will be our 10th episode, and I want us to celebrate together. So I've invited a very, very special guest to be part of the show next week. I'm not going to give any more away, but you do not want to miss that episode because you'll get some opportunities to talk to that special guest of ours and hear from her. I don't even know at this point what kind of topic we're going to talk about, but I know that it is going to be amazing because we're celebrating our 10th episode together. Let me just thank you for joining me today in our low self-esteem with women and how we can overcome it and thrive it. I really do appreciate that you join me each and every week. And in order to be sure not to miss an episode, make sure that you share, like, and subscribe so that you do not miss a show whatsoever, including next week. But until then, I look forward to hearing from you in the comments. Please let me know. Click the link. Let's connect. Let's do a meet and greet, and we'll see you next time.